Hello and welcome to today's tutorial where we will talk about grabbing CSV files, or you can grab JSON files, but we're going to do CSV files from the internet and using that data to create a visualization in P5. So we talked briefly about data visualization, the history, certain do's and don'ts of creating these visualizations during class. But for this is just really basic how to gather the data and how to manipulate it in P5. I'll show you briefly these slides just in case you're interested in it or missed it. So just saying the difference between data graphics and data art. I'll lean y'all into data art a bit more, but feel free to be more strict with yourself and lean into statistical graphics. But just the history and evolution. So one of the first graphs ever found, a little bit about Playfair, using imagery with charts, different types of maps. And then like some pretty cool links that I won't get into right now, but interactive and real-time data, which is kind of what we are going to lean into because we're using code. So we can actually do that stuff. Principles that just for your visualization, avoiding distortions, avoiding distorting the data. So like telling truth with data and ethics surrounding that. And our main concept, or our main topic here, which is gathering data. So here's some ChatGPT suggestions for how to gather data, which I agree with. So what data do you want? You can use data online, data.gov, World Bank, Kaggle. You can go and do research and find different, maybe they don't have like a CSV for you to use, but they have the data, and then you can create categories yourself and make your own CSV, which is really, really easy to do. You can like find APIs online, application programming interfaces that have like financial data APIs and stuff like that. Open Weather Map for weather data. You could conduct your own surveys and questionnaires and gather your own data and then make a CSV and things like that. So we talked about what the difference between CSV and JSON is. CSV stands for comma separated values. JSON stands for JavaScript object notation. And this is just two different ways to format data. This is an example of data that is exactly the same, but formatted as a JSON in the squiggly brackets here. And this is formatted as CSV, where you have like the category header, name, age, email, and it's just separated by commas. So it's just two different ways of doing it. I don't know if one is necessarily better than the other, but we'll talk about CSVs today. This is one that I created myself. It's a very tiny data set, but I did some, web scraping where I was interested in twin stuff and I couldn't find any CSVs, so I just found charts and I made my own. Making your own CSV is very easy. You do what I said before, but then you just come here, you create file, you say what, data.csv or data.json, and you add file, and here you'll put that information that you made, and then I'll get rid of the spacing, right? So you could do that, or let's go ahead and look at gathering, finding these CSVs. So you could go to data.gov and do a little bit of research data. It's got a ton of data sets, and here you can see CSV and JSON, like the way that it's formatted. So that's what we're going to look at, these CSVs. So you like click that CSV, and it just goes and downloads this Excel spreadsheet. Another way is you could use, you could like click on this here and grab this URL. And the way that you would like write this, if you're using a URL in P5, you say let data equal open close quotations and paste your URL. And then you could, create the table using, I'm going to change data to actually URL, sorry. So that's how you would gather that instead of making a CSV. But let's talk about making a CSV. So we've got our URL variable, and we'll do a data variable for this data CSV here. And I want to use something from my research on the web, right? So there's many ways to go about doing this, and I've tried to figure out the easiest way for y'all, because whenever you go to like research data at like data.gov, you find like a bunch of this information that maybe you don't care about. You've got a lot of data that maybe you won't use as well. So data.gov, I couldn't find anything I liked, so I went to Kaggle instead. And if you go to this Kaggle website, you have to create a profile. So if you want to do that, go ahead and do that. I found data that I was a little bit more interested in here. So the most streamed Spotify songs in 2023, and then you can like I looked for the URL, and I couldn't find it here. But that's kind of like what I wanted to do. I felt using the URL would be easier. But instead, I'll go and I'll download. And it opens up a lot of information. It's got the header, so track name, artist count, release year, all of this stuff, okay? It's got streams. So all I really care about is like who the artist is and maybe how many streams they had for right now. So instead of using like all of this information, I'm gonna make my life slightly easier, and I'm just gonna copy like part of it. So I've got the streams in here, and I've got the artist name as well. Instead of writing out manually a CSV, I'll come over to ChatGPT. I'll say, format the following data as a .csv or as a CSV, and paste it. And it didn't give me everything. You might have to do it in like sections so you don't overwhelm ChatGPT, but it did give me some of it, and I'll just work with what it gave me for right now. So it's got the header up here, artist, category, year, month, day, streams, right? So it made it all look really nice and tidy, and it added the commas for us, which is really helpful. And that's the point, is like I don't want to have to go in there and add all of the commas, right? So I'm going to copy that. And in my data.csv that I made, I'm just going to paste it and hope for the best. So yeah, cool. So now instead of, adding all these commas, it did it for me, and that's really great. So cool. So I'm going to come to my sketch, and I'll say let data. And in order to load a table, I have to do the preload function. So function preload. I'll do data equals load table. And you see here it has file name, extension, header, callback, blah, blah, blah. And you could come over here into p5.js and check out the description. So it reads the contents of a file or URL and creates a table object with its values. So table will only look for a header row if the header option is included. And you can see just more about this if you want to read through it with more intention. But here we'll put the file name, which is data.csv, right? Or if you're using the URL, the only difference would be you put the variable name here, URL, right? And then comma, and we'll put the type of table that is, so a CSV format, and then we'll put header so it knows to read this first column, or I'm sorry, this first row as a header row. And now let's work with this data. So you're going to put an if statement, if data, if data is read, then do what's inside of this if statement. And the reason why we're going to do that is because sometimes the data sets that we gather are really freaking huge. And if we don't put this, it'll get messed up. Or we'll have to like wait for a really long time for things to happen. So we'll just do like this: if data is being read, then do this. So just remember, necessary for large data sets. Cool. So let's just press play to make sure everything is good. Yeah, so it's reading our data. When I press play, I'm not getting any errors. And then inside of the if data, I'll say get the amount of rows by doing let number of rows equal data.get rows. So get amount of rows, and then get specific column, because like I said before, I don't really want to use all of these columns, like month and day I don't really care about. So I'll use the artist column, which if we're counting in the way that a programmer would count, we have to start at 0. So if we've got, normally we say column 1, 2, 3, but we're coding, so we're going to do column 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So if I want column 0 here, in my get specific column, I'll say let artist equal get column 0. I can also put the header, but you have to do it like exactly right. So you have to say it's capsed artist. So here I could put, instead of a 0, I could put artist, get specific column, get column. Oh, and then we have to say, we have to use that dot notation. So data dot get column. So get column from the data CSV, get the artist column. Now let's get one more column. Let's get the streams column. So 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I want to read through all of the rows in those columns. So I'll create a for loop. So I got the rows here, and I'm getting the specific columns. I'm going to read through all the columns by saying for let I equal 0. If I is less than num rows, then I plus plus. So reading through all of the rows, selecting specific columns. So it should have access to all the info that I want it to have access to. So what do we want to do next? Create rectangles for each artist. Height of rectangle is equal to the strings. Console.log artists, just to see if it's grabbing that information. Cool, so it is. So I want to create a rect. Also type in no loop, so your sketch just runs through one time. No loop. In this setup, I'm gonna do rect mode center. So I want my rectangle in here. I have to put the X, Y, width, and height. So I want my X to be equivalent to the artists. We've console.logged artists, and if you see here, it's inside of this array, so it's created an array. So we'll do let X equal artist, open close bracket, array of I. Y, we'll just put location is going to be at height, so we want it to start at like the bottom of the sketch. And then our rect width should be just maybe 10 pixels wide. And then rect height is going to be dependent on the number of streams. So we'll do streams array I and plug in all that info and see if it did the thing. Let's play. So I think it's going down because it's on positive height. So we just need to change the streams to negative, so it goes up. I was running into an issue and I think I figured out the problem. So I want to create rectangles. So up here where I said get data.get rows, this is get row count actually. Sorry about that. Let's implement these X, Y, rect width, and rect height. Okay, so cool. Something's there. So now we just want to space them out a little bit. So we could do I times rect width. So let's change this 50 to a scalable number, 0.02 maybe. There we go. So now we can kind of see what's going on. So we've got 22 rows minus the header, that means 21. So if we go to sketch, what we should be seeing drawn is 21 rectangles, so we have that. And then the height is the amount of streams going off the page, so we actually have to like remap the streams to the height of the canvas. Let's try. Let rect height instead of the streams, we'll do rect height equals map the streams 0 to max streams and then 0 to height, but then it has to be negative, right? So it's mapping it to the height. Cool. And then I want to stretch it all the way across the screen here. It's X location. Yeah, if you just want to space it out, you can add like an offset or whatever. And I want it to be scalable, so I'm just going to tweak the numbers. And then move it over plus that's how you get data, and it's how you use data from your CSV by loading a table and grabbing information from the rows and columns and visualizing it in some way. Now this is like the very basic way that you might, visualize this data. It's not really telling me anything specific about the artists or like the year or anything. I don't know anything right now. So you're gonna use symbols, imagery, and maybe some interaction to tell us a story through the visualization that you create. And maybe some animation, and we want it to be generative. So maybe we just see the artist and the, something, maybe the artist, this is just off the top of my head, every time I press play, it's a new artist, and their head size is dependent on the amount of streams that they got in that year or something like that. But we're not going to use any text unless it's clicking, like we'll have an icon for the key, and when we hover over the icon or click on the icon, it'll show us like what everything means. But whenever we're looking at the finished product, it's just going to be the the visual information. So cool. That's hopefully quick enough description, and happy coding.